At school, you played the role of a prodigal and mischievous young master, but ultimately, you became the renowned lord of the underworld. This was because the Su family was once the foremost family. To avoid attracting too much attention, the patriarch ordered the entire family to live incognito. As a result, 25 years later, anyone could trample over the Su family. To restore the family's glory, you decided to no longer keep a low profile. At this moment, at the Queen's Bar in Linzhou, a group of young men and women were swaying in the middle of the dance floor, while you sat in a booth on the second floor, smiling at the woman across from you. Miss Mu, as the most beautiful woman in Linzhou, it's quite a surprise that you would agree to a blind date with me. Mu Qianyu smiled slightly and said, I've heard that among the Su brothers, the eldest, Su Nan, is as sharp as a blade. The second, Su Qin, is as steady as a mountain. And the third son, Su Wuji, is a prodigal and dissolute young master. Seeing you today, with a cigarette in your mouth and grinning, I realize how accurate people's perceptions are. However, Mu Qianyu shook her head and chuckled. After meeting you today, I find that young Master Su is quite an interesting person, not quite matching the rumors. Then, a golden light flashed in her eyes as she said, Young Master Su, actually, our Mu family has encountered some trouble. My father said only you can help me. Hearing this, you grinned and said, Miss Mu, your father thinks too highly of me. I'm just a good-for-nothing who spends every day hanging out in nightclubs. How could I possibly have the ability to get involved in the disputes of your great family? Just then, 3 beautiful women happened to pass by, wearing tight skirts that exuded a strong sense of allure. You whistled loudly at them and called out with a smile, Hey, you 3 come find me later. Just like yesterday. We'll battle till dawn. The 3 girls responded with flirtatious glances and called back, Boss Su, we'll definitely keep you company to the end. You laughed heartily and said, Great, no one leaves until their waist gives out. This made Mu Qianyu, who was beside you, frown slightly, but then she smiled and said, Even at such a time, you don't forget to flirt with girls. Young Master Su, you really are a fascinating person. There was no disappointment in her eyes, as the rumors about the third son of the Su family were that he was capable of any evil deed. In fact, Mu Qianyu was somewhat puzzled as to why her father would want such a person to help her. At that moment, a discordant shout came from the next booth. Stupid woman, if you don't drink this wine today, don't even think about signing your company's contract. Several people turned to look and saw a man in a suit grabbing a girl by the hair, forcing the mouth of a bottle into her mouth. You waved your hand in annoyance and shouted, So nosy, Zipang. Make them quiet down. Okay, boss, replied the towering bodyguard, who then walked over to the next booth. With a fist as big as a sand pot, he smashed it into the man's face, causing him to fall to the ground with a blooded face and a scream. Then, Zipang walked back and asked in a deep voice, Boss, quiet enough. You twitched your mouth and frowned. How many times have I told you to be gentle? Zipang said somewhat innocently. Boss, I only used 10% of my strength. I was really gentle. You pointed to your temple and said somewhat awkwardly, Miss Mu, my brother here isn't very bright. Please forgive him. Mu Qianyu chuckled and brought the topic back, saying, Actually, I'm not interested in fighting for the family inheritance rights either. The reason I decided to do this is for self-preservation. You shook your head and laughed. Hey, in the battles for inheritance rights in great families, a slight misstep can cost you your life. I'm afraid I can't help Miss Mu with her request. Mu Qianyu frowned, then took out an envelope and said, If we cooperate, I won't let young Master Su suffer any losses. You took the envelope and opened it directly, finding a check for 8 million inside. Mu Qianyu said seriously, This is just the deposit. There will be a heavy reward after the matter is completed. You looked Mu Qianyu up and down, then grinned and said, Miss Mu, I'm not short of money. If you want me to help you, that's fine, but we'll have to change the conditions. Just then, Zipang interrupted. Boss, the finance department says we're short of money. You said somewhat helplessly, if we're short of money, we'll deduct it from your salary. This almost made Mu Qianyu laugh out loud. She always felt that this Su Wuji was somewhat different from the violent, bloodthirsty, and promiscuous scoundrel image portrayed in the rumors, so she met his playful gaze head-on. She asked softly, What specific conditions do you have, young Master Su? Feel free to say it. In fact, Mu Qianyu had already guessed what you were going to say. The conditions men propose to women are usually related to their bodies. Sure enough, you grinned and said, If Miss Mu is willing to be my girlfriend, then your Mu family's matters will naturally become my matters. Mu Qianyu wore an expression of having expected this and reply, I've heard young Master Su has many girlfriends. Surely, you don't lack me. I think we can become good friends. You wagged your finger and said with a smile, No. I never make friends with beautiful women. Zipang, see her out. Mu Qianyu was momentarily stunned, then flashed a bright smile and said, Young Master Su, you truly are a fascinating person. We'll meet again. Her smile left you momentarily dazed, and you subconsciously murmured, So beautiful, beautiful enough to make me want to change my mind. Outside the bar, as Mu Qianyu opened the passenger door, she suddenly turned and asked, Mr. Pang, rumors say your boss has many girlfriends. How many women are actually by his side? Zipang's square face showed no expression as he replied, My boss told me not to say. Mu Qianyu's eyes sparkled with curiosity, and she pressed further, What did I ask you to say? Zipang answered dutifully, My boss told me not to say he's a virgin. Mu Qianyu couldn't help but laugh. Mr. Pang, I doubt anyone in Linzhou's nightlife would believe that. Before she could finish, her phone buzzed with a message. Although Miss Mu can't be my girlfriend, I won't be returning the check you handed over. Immediately after, the DJ's enthusiastic voice echoed from the bar. Young Master Su has made a fortune tonight. All tonight's expenses are on young Master Su. Deafening cheers erupted from the bar's entrance. Leaving Mu Qianyu speechless, she stomped her foot and exclaimed, "This Su Wuji took the deposit but won't do the job. He's even more of a scoundrel than the rumors say." On the top floor of the Queen's bar was your private suite. Rumors had it that every girl who entered would emerge the next morning with a radiant glow, and it was always at least 2 girls at a time. Your notorious reputation had spread far and wide. At that moment, you were sitting at a table with 3 girls, shuffling mahjong tiles, and exclaimed excitedly, "Come on, let's battle till dawn." The 3 girls were beaming, thrilled to have found a wealthy yet terrible mahjong player. They always won a lot from you, but before the round could finish, the door was suddenly pushed open. Zipang's towering figure squeezed in. You glared at him and said irritably, "Zipang, how many times have I told you to knock? What if I were in the middle of something inappropriate?" One of the girls giggled and said, "I wouldn't mind doing something inappropriate, but young Master Su only ever plays mahjong with us." You shot her a look and said, "Behave, you little minxes." Then, turning to Zipang, who stood motionless, you asked, "What did Mu Qianyu say before she left?" Zipang replied earnestly, "Boss, Miss Mu said you took the money, but won't do the job. She said you're even more of a scoundrel than the rumors say." The 3 girls burst into laughter again, but you retorted, "I'm not the Mu family's son-in-law. Why should I get involved in their mess? What's in it for me?" You then threw down a tile and said, "3 of circles." The 3 girls immediately overturned their tiles and cooed, "Thank you, young Master Su. You've just fed us all." Your face darkened as you tossed a stack of money onto the table and said, "I'm done for today. My luck's off. Let's continue tomorrow. It's all Mu Qianyu's fault for ruining my mahjong mojo." The 3 girls happily took the money and left. Just then, a woman in a cheongsam walked in and said, "Boss, there are 2 matters to report. First, your aunt, Sushian, just called." You immediately sat up straight, a hint of wariness in your voice as you asked, "What did that she-devil say?" The cheongsam woman smiled and replied, "Auntie said that if you made Mu Qianyu unhappy during the blind date, she would stop covering the bar's losses." Why didn't she say that earlier? Mu Qianyu's already stormed off. Now I have to figure out how to win her back. Do I look that shameless? Zipang nodded and said, "Boss, you can do it." You shot him a glare, then waved your hand dismissively and said, "What's the second matter?" The cheongsam woman's expression turned serious as she said, "We caught 3 kids sneaking drugs in a private room. I came to ask for your instructions." You smiled coldly and said, "Follow the usual rules. Just cripple them. Why bother asking me for such a small matter? Is there something else?" The cheongsam woman nodded and said, "All 3 are under 18. One of them happens to be Mu Qianyu's cousin, Mu Jihui." You slapped your thigh and laughed. "Perfect. Just when I needed a pillow, someone delivered one. I was just worrying about how to win Mu Qianyu back." You immediately dialed a number and put it on speaker. Soon, Mu Qianyu's cool voice came through. "Young Master Su, what brings you to call me? Did your conscience finally kick in, and you're returning the money?" You chuckled and said, "How's your relationship with your cousin, Mu Jihui?" Mu Qianyu replied with a hint of sarcasm, "Not great. We're practically at odds. Shouldn't you be busy battling with your beauties after earning a fortune from me?" Why the sudden interest in this? You glanced at the mahjong tiles on the table and grinned. The battle just ended. Mu Qianyu's lips curled into a mocking smile. Ended so soon? You nearly choked on your saliva, pausing for a few seconds before saying, "Mu Jihui and a few others were caught doing drugs in my bar. I plan to break one of their legs and hand them over to the police. What do you think?" Mu Qianyu was momentarily stunned. Suddenly, the tone shifted as Mu Qianyu said, "Thank you for asking me in advance. However, my family can't control this." You decide. Instantly, your smile widened. "After all, you're so beautiful. I always show extra respect to beautiful women." Mu Qianyu fell silent for 2 seconds before asking, "If I had a good relationship with Mu Jihui, would you have let him off this time?" You burst into laughter and said, "Miss Mu, even though you might become my girlfriend, my bar has its own rules. No one can break them." After hanging up, you gave yourself a thumbs up and chuckled. "That wasn't too forced. Perfect performance." Zipang frowned and said, "Boss, I read in a book that men should let women hang up first." You cursed. "That book must have been written by a simp. Tear it up and learn from me instead." Zipang frowned again. "Boss, weren't you just simping?" You glared at him and snapped, "Zipang, your salary for next month is gone too." Meanwhile, Mu Qianyu stared at the disconnected phone and murmured to herself, "Su Wuji, by making this call, are you planning to get involved in the Mu family's power struggle? Your change is too sudden. I can't quite figure you out." After tossing and turning in bed for 2.5 hours, Mu Qianyu still couldn't sleep. She picked up her phone and sent a message. "Yangxi, are you awake? I need someone to talk to." The call came through immediately. "Qianyu, I was about to sleep, but 3 miners with broken legs were dropped at the station. Now I can't sleep either." Mu Qianyu frowned. "What happened? A fight?" Pu Yangxi shook her head. "No. 3 spoiled brats caused trouble after getting high. By the way, one of them is your cousin, Mu Jihui." Mu Qianyu quickly explained. "Mu Jihui just returned from abroad a couple of years ago. We don't get along well." Pu Yangxi lowered her voice. The 3 girls were beaming, thrilled to have found a wealthy yet terrible mahjong player. They always won a lot from you, but before the round could finish, the door was suddenly pushed open. Zipang's towering figure squeezed in. You glared at him and said irritably, "Zipang, how many times have I told you to knock? What if I were in the middle of something inappropriate? One of the girls giggled and said, I wouldn't mind doing something inappropriate, but young Master Su only ever plays mahjong with us. You shot her a look and said, behave, you little minxes. Then, turning to Zipang, who stood motionless, you asked, what did Mu Qianyu say before she left? Zipang replied earnestly, boss, Miss Mu said you took the money, but won't do the job. She said you're even more of a scoundrel than the rumors say. The three girls burst into laughter again, but you retorted, I'm not the Mu family's son-in-law. Why should I get involved in their mess? What's in it for me? You then threw down a tile and said, 3 of circles. The three girls immediately overturned their tiles and coo. Thank you, young Master Su. You've just fed us all. Your face darkened as you tossed a stack of money onto the table and said, I'm done for today. My luck's off. Let's continue tomorrow. It's all Mu Qianyu's fault for ruining my mahjong mojo. The three girls happily took the money and left. Just then, a woman in a cheongsam walked in and said, boss, there are 2 matters to report. First, your aunt, Sushian, just called. You immediately sat up straight, a hint of wariness in your voice as you asked, what did that she-devil say? The cheongsam woman smiled and replied, Auntie said that if you made Mu Qianyu unhappy during the blind date, she would stop covering the bar's losses. Why didn't she say that earlier? Mu Qianyu's already stormed off. Now I have to figure out how to win her back. Do I look that shameless? Zipeng nodded and said, boss, you can do it. You shot him a glare, then waved your hand dismissively and said, what's the second matter? The cheongsam woman's expression turned serious as she said, we caught 3 kids sneaking drugs in a private room. I came to ask for your instructions. You smiled coldly and said, follow the usual rules. Just cripple them. Why bother asking me for such a small matter? Is there something else? The cheongsam woman nodded and said, all 3 are under 18. One of them happens to be Mu Qianyu's cousin, Mu Jihui. You slapped your thigh and laughed. Perfect. Just when I needed a pillow, someone delivered one. I was just worrying about how to win Mu Qianyu back. You immediately dialed a number and put it on speaker. Soon, Mu Qianyu's cool voice came through. Young Master Su, what brings you to call me? Did your conscience finally kick in? And you're returning the money. You chuckled and said, how's your relationship with your cousin, Mu Jihui? Mu Qianyu replied with a hint of sarcasm. Not great. We're practically at odds. Shouldn't you be busy battling with your beauties after earning a fortune from me? Why the sudden interest in this? You glanced at the mahjong tiles on the table and grinned. The battle just ended. Mu Qianyu's lips curled into a mocking smile. Ended so soon? You nearly choked on your saliva, pausing for a few seconds before saying, Mu Jihui and a few others were caught doing drugs in my bar. I plan to break one of their legs and hand them over to the police. What do you think? Mu Qianyu was momentarily stunned. Suddenly, the tone shifted as Mu Qianyu said, thank you for asking me in advance. However, my family can't control this. You decide. Instantly, your smile widened. After all, you're so beautiful. I always show extra respect to beautiful women. Mu Qianyu fell silent for 2 seconds before asking, if I had a good relationship with Mu Jihui, would you have let him off this time? You burst into laughter and said, Miss Mu, even though you might become my girlfriend, my bar has its own rules. No one can break them. After hanging up, you gave yourself a thumbs up and chuckled. That wasn't too forced. Perfect performance. Zipeng frowned and said, boss, I read in a book that men should let women hang up first. You cursed. That book must have been written by a simp. Tear it up and learn from me instead. Zipeng frowned again. Boss, weren't you just simping? You glared at him and snapped, Zipeng, your salary for next month is gone too. Meanwhile, Mu Qianyu stared at the disconnected phone and murmured to herself, Suwuji, by making this call, are you planning to get involved in the Mu family's power struggle? Your change is too sudden. I can't quite figure you out. After tossing and turning in bed for 2.5 hours, Mu Qianyu still couldn't sleep. She picked up her phone and sent a message. Yangxi, are you awake? I need someone to talk to. The call came through immediately. Qianyu, I was about to sleep, but 3 miners with broken legs were dropped at the station. Now I can't sleep either. Mu Qianyu frowned. What happened? A fight? Pu Yangxi shook her head. No. 3 spoiled brats caused trouble after getting high. By the way, one of them is your cousin, Mu Jihui. Mu Qianyu quickly explained. Mu Jihui just returned from abroad a couple of years ago. We don't get along well. Pu Yangxi lowered her voice. Mu Huanrui, who had a good relationship with Mu Qianyu, replied. Qianyu yeah. Mu Jihui's leg was almost completely ruined. From what I heard, he was also stripped naked at the time. Mu Qianyu couldn't hold back her laughter anymore. Theft, she thought to herself. That guy really doesn't do things the normal way, even when beating someone up. However, a sharp voice suddenly rang out from the hospital room. Mu Qianyu, how can you laugh when your brother is in this state? Mu Qianyu smiled slightly and said, Auntie, why do you think this is my doing? Mu Qianyu, Suwuji went on a blind date with you. And right after, he broke Jihui's leg. How dare you say this has nothing to do with you? You two are a despicable pair. Despite the harsh insults, Mu Qianyu remained calm. Auntie, if I had known Mu Jihui was doing drugs in the private room during my blind date, I would have been the first to call the police. Her words caused an uproar. The relatives who had been fussing over Mu Jihui immediately backed away. Auntie Qiaoyuru screamed. No matter what Jihui did, he's still a child. Mu Qianyu's beautiful face showed a hint of mockery. He's 1 month away from turning 18. Still a child. Just then, a lazy voice came from behind her. If he's a child, then we can't let him off. Mu Qianyu turned around and saw Yuan Zipeng standing in the corridor. You had actually come to the hospital yourself. At that moment, Mu Jihui, who had just regained consciousness from the anesthesia, saw the culprit and immediately shouted, Su Wuji, Mu Qianyu, you did this to me. I'll kill you both, you said leisurely. Zipang, this kid still doesn't understand. He needs a good lesson. Got it, boss. Zipang pushed through the crowd, grabbed a stainless steel EV stand, and smashed it onto Mu Jihui's head. Bang! Mu Jihui's head nearly split open, and he passed out again, blood covering his face. The Mu family members present were stunned, their minds struggling to process what had just happened. Chia Yuru's eyes burned with rage as she pointed at you and shouted, arrest them. Several black-suited bodyguards appeared at the end of the corridor. You immediately stepped in front of Mu Qianyu and shouted at the bodyguards, if you have a problem, come at me. Leave Qianyu alone. She's innocent. Mu Qianyu's eyelids twitched. She poked your back and said, hey, young Master Su, that's a bit exaggerated. We're not at that level yet. You turned your head and grinned. Kiro's saving beauties need to make a statement. This is my first time. I'm still getting the hang of it. Zipang interjected. Boss, this isn't your first time. You glared at him. Zipang, are you asking for death? Mu Qianyu couldn't help but laugh softly. Meanwhile, Chia Yuru grew even more furious. She screeched, Su Wuji, from today on, your bar will never open again. My husband will drive you out of Linzhou. No one in the Mu family, except Mu Qianyu, doubted her words. However, in the next second, you simply said leisurely, Zipang, this woman is too nosy. Why haven't you shot her up yet? Zipang's fist, as big as a sandpot, landed squarely on Chia Yuru's face. She fell backward, her head hitting the ground with a loud thud. The other Mu family members were dumbfounded. The power struggles among the wealthy were usually filled with sophisticated schemes. Why had today's events turned so brutally straightforward? At that moment, Chia Yuru's bodyguards moved to attack Zipang. But Mu Qianyu suddenly spoke in a calm yet commanding tone. Who dares? Her simple words carried an authority that didn't match her delicate appearance. Stopping the bodyguards in their tracks, Mu Qianyu added, step back. The bodyguards hesitated but ultimately retreated to the end of the corridor. The other Mu family members were shocked. They couldn't understand how Mu Qianyu had gained such control over the bodyguards. You clapped your hands and said to the Mu family, let me remind you, if I find out anyone dares to bully Qianyu again, they'll be chopped into 8 pieces. Got it? Zipang nodded seriously. Boss, I got it, 8 pieces. You glared at him. I wasn't talking to you. Then you turned to Mu Qianyu and grinned. Qianyu, since everything's settled, I'll take my leave now. Mu Qianyu nodded and smiled. Go ahead. But stop scaring them. If you keep this up, I won't be able to invite you over in the future. As she spoke, she gently tugged your arm. Her words and actions were indeed reminiscent of close friends, making you chuckle with delight. However, once you reached the hospital entrance, Mu Qianyu looked at you seriously and asked, why did you suddenly decide to help me? You smiled and said, of course, it's because the 5th branch of the Mu family has done too much evil. I, the young master, must stand up and uphold justice. Zipang interjected, boss, that's not what you said on the way here. Ignoring your murderous glare, Zipang said honestly, Miss Mu, my boss said he came to save you, mainly because he's obsessed with your body. Hearing such blunt words, Mu Qianyu's cheeks flushed. As she watched your car drive away, Mu Qianyu waved her hand, and a Mercedes-Benz pulled up. She got in and asked the man in the driver's seat, Uncle Chen, any news from my 5th uncle? The man, wearing a baseball cap and mask, replied, Miss Mu Zudong was in Guangcheng for a business deal. He flew back as soon as he heard about his son. He just landed. Mu Qianyu's lips curled into a faint smile. My 5th uncle is back. Things are about to get more interesting, the masked man said solemnly. Miss, the old master called yesterday. He told me to remind you, even if you don't want to fight for anything, you must never retreat. In the face of such a large family business, no one will believe you're willing to give up. If you retreat, you'll be forever trampled by the winners. And you might even lose your life. Mu Qianyu's eyes narrowed slightly. I never planned to retreat, but Uncle Chen, you seem a bit off today. Li Qingqin hesitated before saying, Miss, last night at 2:30 a.m. I found 2 assassins in your neighborhood's garden. Mu Qianyu immediately sat up straight, her eyes sharpening. Li Qingqin continued, when I found them, they were already unconscious, with their limbs broken. Mu Qianyu frowned slightly. Since they're still alive, we can interrogate them. Miss, I've already interrogated them. These 2 assassins were former rebels from Myanmar. They were hired and smuggled here to kidnap you. They arrived in Linzhou yesterday afternoon, but while they were scouting the area, a masked man suddenly appeared and broke their limbs. Mu Qianyu's gaze intensifying. Can we find out who this masked man is? Li Qingqin frowned. During the fight, the masked man was caught on the back by a dagger. That's the only clue. At that moment, Mu Qianyu suddenly remembered your call last night. She murmured to herself, was it you? Li Qingqin glanced at her through the rearview mirror and asked, Miss. Mu Qianyu snapped out of her thoughts and said, no, I don't have an answer yet. Then she called Pu Yangxi. Yangxi, do you have time? I need to talk. Tu Yangxi's voice came through. I'm parked outside Jiangnan Orthopedic Hospital. I took the afternoon off, so I can spend the whole day with you. Mu Qianyu immediately got out of the car and waved at a domestic SUV in the distance. She then said to Li Qingqin, Uncle Chen, just follow us. Li Qingqin nodded. After Mu Qianyu closed the car door, he made an international call. Old master, there's something I need to report. Mu Yuoming's voice came through. Go ahead. In the background, someone shouted, hey, Su Wuxian, stop peeking at my cards. Lee Kinkin was speechless. Wasn't the old master supposed to be recuperating? Why was he playing cards? But he still reported the events of last night in detail. Unexpectedly, Mu Yuanming replied nonchalantly. It's not a big deal. With Su Wuji around, it's fine. He's Su Wuxian's nephew, after all. A frustrated voice interrupted. Old Mu, don't bring that up. It pisses me off. What kind of name did my idiot brother give his son? It sounds like he's from my generation. He's just trying to one-up me. Stop complaining. I've got a straight flush. Half an hour later, Pu Yangxi took Mu Qianyu back to her place, a villa in Linzhou's upscale district. As soon as Mu Qianyu entered, she exclaimed, Yangxi, your place is something money can't buy. Pu Yangxi smiled. A sister lent it to me. If it were up to my salary, I couldn't even afford the rent here. Just then, a shirtless man appeared on the second floor, unwrapping bandages and complaining. Yangxi, you're just in time. I got into a fight last night and hurt my back. Come help me with the medicine. It hurts so much. If it weren't for that idiot Mu Qianyu. Before he could finish, his gaze fell on the white-dressed girl sitting on the sofa in the living room. The words caught in his throat. Pu Yangxi, hearing you were injured, rushed upstairs. You're hurt. How bad is it? Who did this? Mu Qianyu, quick-witted, was momentarily stunned. Why was Su Wuji at Yangxi's place? And he mentioned getting hurt last night. A realization struck her like lightning. She immediately got up and followed upstairs. By then, Pu Yangxi had already been pulled into the bedroom by you, and the door slammed shut. You pinned Pu Yangxi against the wall and said, Yangxi, you knew I might come today, so you deliberately brought Mu Qianyu here, didn't you? Tu Yangxi pushed you away, concerned. Why didn't you mention getting hurt during breakfast? Let me see your injury. You grinned. It's just a small cut. You've seen me hurt before. Are you worried? Tu Yangxi's cheeks flushed. Don't talk nonsense. I'm older than you. Call me sis. Now lie down so I can treat your wound, or I'll call Qianya. Hearing the threat, you obediently lay down on the bed. Tu Yangxi saw the long wound on your back, stretching from your shoulder blade to your side. Her heart ached. But just as she was about to apply the medicine, Mu Qianyu's voice came from outside. Hey, what are my blind date and my best friend doing behind closed doors? After a 2-second pause, Mu Qianyu pushed the door open. Her eyes immediately fell on the knife wound on your back. Her eyes flickered with emotion. Tu Yangxi glanced at Mu Qianyu and said, Qianyu, let me treat Wuji's wound first. Don't misunderstand. Our relationship isn't what you think. You twitched your mouth. Why did it sound like she was explaining an affair to the wife? Mu Qianyu asked directly. Why didn't you go to the hospital for stitches? This is a lawn wound. You replied narcissistically. No way. That would leave a scar. I need to use my secret recipe to preserve my flawless skin. Tu Yangxi opened the medicine box and took out a bottle of alcohol. Mu Qianyu stepped forward and took it. Let me do it. Tu Yangxi was surprised. You grinned. Qianyu, you're so concerned about me. I might fall for you. Mu Qianyu ignored your teasing and asked, alcohol will hurt. Why not use iodine? You chuckled. Iodine doesn't mix well with the medicine. For my smooth skin, I'll just have to endure it. Mu Qianyu gently dabbed the wound with an alcohol-soaked cotton ball. After applying the medicine, your hair was drenched in sweat, and your back was covered in beads of perspiration. As she bandaged the wound, Mu Qianyu asked calmly, who did you fight with to get hurt like this? You grinned. When we fight for territory or women, it's always real knives and guns. This is nothing. It's as easy as eating and drinking. Mu Qianyu didn't respond, just tied a neat bow on the bandage. You smirked. So, compared to a real man like me, those pampered young masters from the Mu family are weak, right? This time, Mu Qianyu didn't argue. She just sat on the bed and softly agreed. They are weak. When they returned to the living room, Mu Qianyu's cheeks were slightly red, and she was quieter, clearly preoccupied. Just then, her phone rang. It was her uncle, Mu Shanhu. Qianyu, there's a family meeting at the old house in an hour. You must attend. Be prepared. After hanging up, Mu Qianyu stood up. Yangxi, I have to go. There's an emergency family meeting. This time, Mu Qianyu wasn't facing the younger generation she'd seen at the hospital, but a group of cunning old foxes. You quickly stood up. This is a perfect chance for a hero to save the beauty. Let me help. Mu Qianyu smiled softly. No need. I can handle it. I'm not some naive girl. You looked at her stunning face and smirked. I don't know about naive, but you definitely look sweet. Mu Qianyu glanced at you and smiled. Stop teasing. Focus on healing. After saying goodbye, the first thing Mu Qianyu did in the car was open her phone and send a message. You must have seen the whole fight last night. What's your assessment of him? In fact, Mu Qianyu had always had someone protecting her. Lee Kinkin, who was driving, seemed unaware of this. A reply came quickly. He's good. He deserves a place on your chessboard. Mu Qianyu smiled at the message, her lips curving into a charming smile. Meanwhile, after Mu Qianyu left, Tu Yangxi looked at you and asked softly, I don't think anyone in Linzhou could hurt you right now. Who did you fight? You sighed helplessly. To assassins from Myanmar. If I hadn't been injured before, I wouldn't have gotten this cut. Tu Yangxi immediately asked with concern, you were injured before. When did that happen? She grabbed your hand and placed it on her thigh, feeling your pulse. After a minute, she said, your pulse is weak, your lungs are injured and need time to recover. But your heart rate is unusually fast. Why is that? You grinned and looked at your right hand. You're pressing my hand so tightly against your thigh. How could my heart rate not speed up? Tu Yangxi looked down and saw your hand almost touching her inner thigh. She quickly let go and slapped your arm. Stop joking. We're talking about your injury. You chuckled. Before I left home, my dad gave me a little book and told me to study. I ended up injuring myself while practicing. You took out a crumpled booklet from your pocket and tossed it to Pu Yangtze. Wo's notes. Tu Yangtze was shocked. This is a legendary martial arts treasure. And you just carry it around like this. You raised an eyebrow. A treasure? I've never heard of it. Tu Yangtze carefully smoothed the pages. Rumor has it that your father dominated the world with a four-edged military dagger and this book. You were stunned. What? My unreliable dad dominated the world. Tu Yangtze was equally surprised. You didn't know. When your father was at his peak, the Su family was at its zenith. But to avoid drawing too much attention, the old patriarch ordered the family to leave the capital. All stories about the Su family have been erased from the internet. Most young people today have no memory of the Su family. You looked annoyed, so I could have been a carefree rich third generation. But my dad kicked me out with only 200 yuan to my name. Tu Yangtze smiled. Maybe Uncle Su wanted to toughen you up. You gritted your teeth. He just likes giving me random tasks to see me fail. If I'd known this book was so valuable, I would have sold it for a fortune. Tu Yangtze caught something in your words. So, helping Qianyu was also Uncle Su's idea. You shook your head. Not just that. My aunt also told me to make her happy, or she'd stop sending me money. Pu Yangtze laughed. That sounds like yin-ya, but that can't be the main reason you're getting involved with the Mu family. A hint of killing intent flashed in your eyes. There's another reason. According to my sources, someone from the capital has their eyes on Mu Qianyu, and I need a reason to remind the capital of the Su family. Tu Yangtze sat up straight. Not just the capital, but the entire country. After a moment of silence, you sighed. Such a heavy responsibility. I really don't want to bear it. Tu Yangtze's gaze softened. I can push you from behind and give you some motivation. Push me from behind. You grinned, your expression turning mischievous. Then you snapped back to reality and looked at her beautiful face. So, you're not jealous that I'm helping Mu Qianyu? Pu Yangtze smiled. Seeing you find such a beautiful sister-in-law makes me happy. You chuckled. She is beautiful. But for now, we're just using each other. Then you made a call. Zipang. Find me a sturdy car. We're heading out in half an hour to crush the Mu family. Zipang repeated the order seriously. Understood. Boss, find a sturdy car and crush the Mu family. 23 minutes later, you called Zipang again. It's almost half an hour. Where's the car? Zipang frowned. Boss, come to the gate. The security won't let the car in. You didn't complain, just strolled to the gate with your hands in your pockets. But when you saw the scene outside, your eyes widened. This is the car you found. Zipang nodded seriously. You said it had to be sturdy. You stared at the massive Scania heavy-duty truck, its tires taller than you, and gritted your teeth. This is way too sturdy. In front of you was a modified Scania truck, complete with 2 excavators in the back. You glared at Zipang. When people save beauties, they ride white horses or drive luxury cars. You want me to ride a truck and operate an excavator? Zipang replied earnestly. Boss, with 2 excavators working together, we can flatten the Mu family in less than 2 hours. You weakly patted Zipang's shoulder. Why not just get 100 excavators? That'd be even faster. Zipang immediately picked up the phone and called the long-legged manager of Queen's Bar. Manager Z, the boss says we need 98 more excavators. Hurry up. You staggered, almost falling, and glared at Zipang. Then you climbed into the truck's cab, started the engine, and drove off with a roar. Zipang shouted from behind. Boss, I'm not on the truck yet. Your voice came through the nose. Zipang, split up. I'll go to the Mu family's old house. You find Mu Jithui. Zipang jumped onto an excavator and shouted fiercely. Understood. After finding him, cut him into 8 pieces. You stuck your head out the window and yelled, forget cutting. Just drag him by the ear to the Mu family. But with the truck's engine roaring, it was unclear if Zipang heard you. Meanwhile, at the Mu family's old house, the first beauty of Linzhou was being forced into an arranged marriage by the family elders. This was the fate of a wealthy heiress. But just as she prepared to resist, a Scania truck crashed through the garden wall, charging into the estate with overwhelming arrogance. Everyone was stunned. Was the driver drunk? In the cab, you complained. What kind of garden is this? The paths are so narrow. You stepped on the gas, and the truck roared even louder, plowing through a meticulously designed courtyard, smashing flower pots left and right. The scene terrified everyone, fearing they might be crushed. Only Mu Qianyu stood calmly, her gaze fixed on the young man in the driver's seat, a hint of gratitude in her eyes. After tearing through the garden, the truck crashed into the main hall. The driver's window rolled down, and a hand stuck out, making a peace sign at Mu Qianyu. Seeing the childish gesture, Mu Qianyu smiled, then gave a thumbs up. The centuries-old Mu family garden was now in ruins, but you jumped out of the truck nonchalantly and said to Mu Qianyu, Hey, am I late? Mu Qianyu smiled. You're early. I haven't even started yet. She had prepared many strategies to deal with the family elders, but before she could use them, you had already disrupted everything with your brute force. You patted Mu Qianyu's shoulder. Why don't you start now? Then you pointed at the dust-covered Mu family members. Say a few words. If anyone disobeys, I'll just run them over. Everyone you pointed at instinctively stepped back, too afraid to even meet your gaze, fearing the madman's attention. Fifth Uncle Mu Zudong shouted angrily, Guards, guards, catch him. You smirked slightly and said, Are you sure? Instantly, Mu Zudong felt a surge of unease. He suddenly remembered his son was still missing. Just as Mu Zudong was about to say something, a loud rumbling sound came from outside the wall. Everyone turned to look. Dozens of excavators had raised their arms high, and then slammed them down on the courtyard wall. Dust filled the air in an instant. Mu Qianyu rubbed her forehead and said, I really can't invite you over anymore. You're practically demolishing the entire Mu family estate. You chuckled and said, Actually, I was planning to send 50 excavators to the Mu family ancestral graves. But then I thought better of it, since that wouldn't be good for you either. Mu Qianyu looked at the massive demolition team and said helplessly, "Thank you so much." You waved your hand and grinned. "We're family. No need to be polite." Just then, a large excavator rumbled over the ruins. Stopping right next to you, the cabin door opened, and a long-legged woman in a cheongshan jumped out. She was Zi Yinglei, the manager of Queen's Bar. The Mu family members on the scene were stunned. Anyone who frequented Linzhou's nightlife knew this woman was not to be trifled with. Whenever there was trouble at Queen's Bar, Zi Yinglei's presence alone could calm things down. Zi Yinglei walked gracefully over to you and said, "Boss, time was tight. It wasn't easy to find 100 excavators. We only managed to get 60. You waved your hand and said, "That's enough. No need for the rest. We don't want to scare these cowards to death." Suddenly, Zi Yinglei glanced at Mu Qianyu and asked, "Boss lady, are you okay?" You clapped your hands and grinned. "Well said. I'll give you a raise when we get back." Mu Qianyu's face darkened, unsure how to respond. At that moment, Mu Zudong finally snapped out of it, pointing at you. He shouted angrily, "Catch him! Don't let this lunatic cause any more trouble." A group of bodyguards rushed out, cautiously surrounding you. You sneered and waved at Zi Yinglei. Demolish the entire Mu estate. Instantly, the 60 excavators roared to life again, their arms raised high. The bodyguards froze in their tracks. Too scared to move, facing this brute force approach, Mu Zudong felt utterly powerless. "Su Wuji, hand over my son, and I'll pretend today never happened." Just then, an SUV burst through the gap in the wall, charging into the center of the courtyard. The door opened, and Zipang, with his towering frame, squeezed out. "Stop pulling, it hurts." As he got out, he dragged a man with bandaged legs behind him. It was Mu Jifui. You raised an eyebrow and asked, "Zipang, what are you doing with Mu Jifui's ear?" Zipang, still dragging Mu Jifui, said, "Boss, you told me to grab him by the ear and bring him here." "Oh, I see. Well, leaving half an ear looks ugly. Might as well tear it all off." Mu Jifui quickly protested. "No, don't." Before he could finish, Zipang twisted his arm, and the dangling ear was finally torn off completely. "Oh!" Mu Jifui screamed, his face covered in blood. The other bodyguards watched, too scared to make a move, fearing you might kill Mu Jifui on the spot. Mu Qianyu, standing nearby, rubbed her temples and said, "This is a bit too bloody." You grinned and said, "I'm used to it. If you don't like it, I can tone it down." Mu Qianyu sighed and said, "I'll get used to it. You keep doing your thing." At that moment, Mu Zudong finally lost it. He roared, "Su Wuji, what the hell do you want?" You stepped on Mu Jifui's chest and grinned. "Of course, I'm helping Qianyu deal with you. Isn't your family choosing a new leader from the younger generation? I propose Qianyu take the position. Any objections?" In the past, the Mu family's leadership battles would drag on for over a year, but with you here, it seemed like the matter was settled in an instant. Many in the crowd were clearly dissatisfied, but no one dared to speak up. You smirked and said, "Looks like everyone agrees." Just then, Mu Zudong shouted, "If you use violence to seize this position, even if Mu Qianyu becomes the leader, she never gain respect." You glanced at him and snapped, "Mu Lao Wu, if you hadn't forced Qianyu's hand, I wouldn't have resorted to violence. If you dare oppose me again today, I'll sell your son to Thailand to become a ladybo." Mu Zudong's face turned pale, and he immediately shut his mouth. Mu Qianyu, seeing this, couldn't help but laugh. She tugged at your arm and said, "Let me handle this." You laughed heartily and said, "Of course. Teamwork makes the dream work." Mu Qianyu glanced at her cousin, who was still under your foot, and said, "Let Mu Jifui go. Return him to them." Without asking why, you grabbed Mu Jifui's arm and flung him aside. Mu Jifui flew several meters, landing on the ground with a bloody gash on his head. Mu Zudong, seeing his son released, let out a long sigh of relief, and your could be sewn back on. But at least his life was spare. In fact, if Mu Qianyu had kept Mu Jifui as leverage, it would have helped her in the power struggle, but she chose to let him go. You watched this scene, feeling like applauding. This girl was no ordinary person. On the surface, she took a step back, but in reality, she was taking a giant leap forward. Just then, Mu Zudong looked at his niece and said bravely, "Mu Qianyu, you must take responsibility for what happened to the Mu family today, but since you've decided to let Jifui go, we can consider this farce over." He backed down. Though deep down, he wanted to chop you into mincemeat, but he knew he was completely outmatched. Revenge would have to wait for another day. Mu Qianyu, hearing this, found it amusing. The corners of her lips curled into a smile as she said, "But I haven't agreed to end this yet. When they were attacking me, they were all so self-righteous. Now that they're at a disadvantage, they want to call it quits." What a joke. You couldn't help but feel that Mu Qianyu's style really matched your own temperament. At that moment, Mu Zudong felt a surge of unease. He said weakly, "Mu Qianyu, I advise you to quit while you're ahead." But Mu Qianyu glanced at her watch and smiled. If everything goes as planned, the tax inspection team from the capital should already be at the entrance of Mu's real estate. Tax inspection? What are you doing? Mu Zudong immediately realized what was happening. Just then, his phone rang. It was his secretary. "Boss, the tax inspection team has sealed off the finance department. They're accompanied by the capital's economic crime unit." Mu Zudong's face turned pale. He shouted furiously, "Mu Qianyu, you're betraying the family's interests." During the real estate boom, Mu's real estate was practically a money-printing machine. Mu Zudong had made a fortune from it. and had even transferred a significant portion of his assets abroad. But with the recent downturn in the market, Mu's real estate was left with a pile of bad debts. If this came to light, the Mu family's reputation would be ruined. Mu Qianyu smiled faintly and said, "Fifth uncle, this isn't about the family's interests. You just need to return all the money you took." Mu Zedong clenched his fists tightly. He knew that if he had to make up for the taxes and bad debts, it would cost him dearly. Seeing his silence, Mu Qianyu turned to the elder sitting in the main seat and said, "Second grandpa, are you willing to help fifth uncle cover these funds?" Mu Chengchong's face darkened, but he remained silent. After all, the real estate division's bad debts were a bottomless pit. Anyone who stepped in to help would be dragged down with him. With this simple move, Mu Qianyu had effectively divided their camp. Second grandpa, the battle for leadership has just begun. In the future, don't show such bias. It's not good for the family. Her words carried a strong warning. Mu Chengchong was now convinced that Mu Qianyu had dirt on him too, but she hadn't revealed it yet. She and Su Wuji were a perfect match. One was a master strategist, the other a master of chaos. Mu Qianyu then looked around, her gaze sweeping over each person's face. With a hint of mockery, she said, "In recent years, the Mu family has been in decline. If it weren't for our branch constantly bailing out the family, do you really think you could still live so comfortably? Do you even know your own worth?" Faced with this direct challenge, the elder's expressions turned even uglier than if they were crying. Mu Qianyu glanced at the mess around her, and added casually, "As for the cost of repairing the estate, fifth uncle can cover that." Mu Zedong's face turned ashen. A third of the estate's buildings had collapsed, and many precious landscapes were destroyed. Restoring everything would cost a fortune. Then Mu Qianyu added, "Oh, and this isn't a suggestion." Her calm tone carried an overwhelming authority, silencing the Mu family elders. Finally, Mu Qianyu sighed softly and said, "Since no one has any objections, let's consider this matter closed. My father is recuperating abroad. I'm sure he wouldn't want to see today's events either." Just as the Mu family members were about to leave, a voice suddenly rang out. "Wait, I haven't dismissed you yet." Everyone instinctively stopped in their tracks. Worried you might stir up more trouble, you walked to the front of the crowd, looked around, and asked with a smile, "Which one of you is Mu Jiang?" All eyes turned to a young man standing at the back. He was Mu Jiang, the eldest son of Mu Dong, Mu Qianyu's third uncle. A year older than Mu Qianyu. "Why are you looking for me?" "I didn't say a single word against Mu Qianyu during the family meeting." You grinned and said, "Don't be so nervous." Then you reached out to the side and called, "Zipang." Zipang immediately placed a baton in your hand. You glanced at it and frowned. "Change it." Zipang then placed a dagger in your palm. Mu Jiang panicked and shouted, "Don't do anything reckless." You grinned and said, "You dared to hire assassins from abroad to target Qianyu, and now you're afraid I'll do something reckless." Before he could react, you plunged the dagger into Mu Jiang's thigh. Your movements were so fast that the Mu family members didn't even have time to react. It wasn't until Mu Jiang fell to the ground, screaming in pain, that everyone snapped out of their daze. A middle-aged man shouted, "Impossible, absolutely impossible. Su Wuji, don't you dare frame Jiang." You glanced at him, and stabbed Mu Jiang's other thigh. Blood spurted out, and Mu Jiang screamed again. Lying on the ground, trembling in pain, Mu Dong, seeing his son in such agony, had bloodshot eyes as he roared, "Su Wuji, are you trying to kill someone? Do you think you're above the law?" You glanced at Zipang and said calmly, "This old man is too nosy." Zipang stepped forward, and delivered a heavy punch to Mu Dong's stomach. The third uncle of the Mu family immediately doubled over, vomiting profusely and unable to speak. At that moment, Mu Yongshou, Mu Qianyu's sixth aunt, shouted, "Mu Qianyu, make Su Wuji stop. This is going to get someone killed." But Mu Qianyu remained where she was, saying calmly, "Whatever he does, I support him." Hearing this, you grinned and said, "Just for that, this trip was worth it." At this point, no one in the Mu family dared to speak, nor did they dare to leave. Finally, the dust settled. Mu Qianyu looked at you deeply and said, "Thank you." You waved your hand and smiled. "Hey, we're family, no need to stand on ceremony." Mu Qianyu didn't argue, but instead advised, "You should go back and rest. I'll handle the rest. I'll come to Queen's Bar to see you tomorrow." Her voice was soft, a stark contrast to her earlier commanding presence. You grinned from ear to ear. Zi Yinglei, standing nearby, also smiled and said, "Welcome, boss lady." You clapped and said, "Zi Yinglei, well said. I'll give you a raise when we get back." Zi Pang, however, quickly interjected, "Boss, the finance department has been saying we're broke." You chuckled and said, "If we deduct your salary for next year, we'll have money, won't we?" Zi Pang replied seriously, "Boss, no wonder the finance department says you're bad at math." You retorted, "They're talking nonsense. How could I be bad at math?" Zi Pang nodded and said, "Manager Zi also said you're bad at math." Instantly, Zi Yinglei's smile froze. Mu Qianyu, watching the three of you bicker, smiled softly, a warmth in her eyes that hadn't been there in a long time. The next evening at 10 p.m., beautiful women, in revealing outfits, stepped out of luxury cars one after another, entering Queen's Bar. Mu Qianyu and Li Qingqin stood at the entrance, but didn't go in immediately. "Uncle Chen, did you find out anything about the situation in Myanmar?" The Linzhou police's efficiency in cross-border arrests is impressive. Li Qingqin frowned and said, "I heard it was done by an international mercenary team. They were originally assisting the Myanmar government in suppressing rebels, but suddenly left to capture everyone involved in Mu Xian's case." Mu Qianyu fell silent for a moment before saying, "If we were to hire this mercenary team, how much would it cost?" Li Qingqin thought for a moment and said, It depends on the difficulty of the mission, but this team's fees are high. At least $300,000 to start. Mu Kyonyu smiled faintly and said, then let's arrange it. Transfer $300,000 to Queen's Bar's account. No. Make it $1 million. After all, he's short on money lately. With that, she walked into the bar, Li Kinkansai, and said, indeed. Suwuji is, after all, Surui's son. His connections abroad are extensive. As Mu Kyonyu reached the entrance, the long-legged manager, Si Yinglei, was already waiting for her. Boss lady, you're here. The boss and Zipang went out to handle some business. They haven't returned yet. Mu Kyonyu didn't bother correcting the title. She just smiled and said, I knew he wouldn't stay put and rest. I'll wait for him. Then, Si Yinglei quickly stepped aside and said, then please follow me to the lounge, boss lady. Mu Kyonyu glanced around the bar and said, I'll just sit here for a while. I'll have a drink and relax. In fact, she was quite interested in learning more about this bar, and even more about its owner. Whatever you say, boss lady. Si Yinglei brought Mu Kyonyu a glass of fruit wine, and then returned to the second floor. Soon after, she saw a few girls in tight skirts, who often played mahjong with you. Enter the bar. Si Yinglei immediately turned to the security guards and said sternly, tell those little minxes, they're not allowed near the boss tonight. If they ruin the boss lady's mood, I'll break their legs. At that moment, Mu Kyonyu sat on a small sofa, sipping her fruit wine. She had never been comfortable with the deafening music before, but after a chaotic day, she now felt an indescribable sense of relaxation. Just then, Mu Kyonyu overheard a girl asking a security guard, excuse me, does Suwuji work here? The security guard looked her over and said, find a seat. But I can't guarantee you'll get a turn. Lots of girls come looking for our boss every day. The girl seemed surprised and asked, Wuji is the boss. At this moment, wearing only boxes. Your first instinct was to turn back and grab a shirt. However, Mu Kyonyu put down the magazine in her hand and smiled. When I was cleaning your wounds, I saw everything. Why are you still shy now? You stopped in your tracks and chuckled awkwardly. It's not that. I'm just a bit thin-skinned. When did you get here? Mu Kyonyu smiled lightly. I've been here for an hour. What? Are you hiding someone in your bedroom? You laughed heartily. Today's a coincidence. If you came any other day, you might actually find a few girls in my bed. Mu Kyonyu smiled faintly. Everyone says you're a playboy, that you never sleep alone. Can you really change that habit? As she spoke, she walked straight into the bedroom and glanced around. Apart from the unmade bed, everything else was spotlessly clean. This didn't match the image of a playboy at all. You followed her in, grinning. So, are you satisfied? Mu Kyonyu didn't answer the question. Instead, she said casually, can I come over often in the future? You were instantly delighted. Of course, if you come to play mahjong, I won't have to deal with being short a player so often. Suddenly, Mu Kyonyu turned to you and said, by the way, is Zipang an Asperger's patient? You pointed to your temple and said, no, he's just an idiot. Mu Kyonyu smiled faintly. Asperger's is a form of autism. They lack emotional communication skills and can't read social cues. The most obvious thing about Zipang is that he can't lie. You looked at her warily. So, what did he tell you? Mu Kyonyu's lips curved slightly, her eyes glowing softly. Nothing at all. Instantly, your face fell. Damn it. He probably even told you what color my underwear is. Mu Kyonyu couldn't help but laugh. Then she got to the main point. By the way, today, could you accompany me to Lingmu Insurance headquarters? I need to officially take over the shares. You frowned. Just the two of us. Mu Kyonyu thought for a moment. We can bring Zipang along. You grinned. This feels like a couple going out. And bringing a fool along. Mu Kyonyu didn't respond. But her ears turned slightly red. Half an hour later, at Lingmu Insurance headquarters. All the board members had gathered in the conference room. It was said that Mu Kyonyu had used underhanded means to seize these shares from Chairman Mu Dongxing. From today onwards, we'll have a new chairman above us. The board vote will definitely fail. Anyone here would be more suitable than Mu Kyonyu for this position. Exactly. If it comes to it, we can use force too. What Mu Kyonyu did to the Mu family, we can do the same to her. From the chaotic discussion, it was clear that most people didn't want to see Mu Kyonyu take over Lingmu Insurance. Just then, the board secretary, He Heng, suddenly stood up. Mu Kyonyu walked into the conference room first, while you instructed Zipang, guard the door. No one comes in without my permission, or their legs get broken. Zipang, with his towering frame, blocked the door completely. Got it, boss. Legs broken. Instantly, the atmosphere in the room became tense. Mu Kyonyu walked to the head of the table and said seriously, hello everyone, I'm Mu Kyonyu, now the largest shareholder of Lingmu Insurance. Today, the group will elect a new chairman. A director slammed the table and shouted, the Mu family is completely out of line. The chairman isn't something you can just replace. I strongly oppose this. Mu Kyonyu seemed to have anticipated this. Mr. Juo, if you disagree, you don't have to raise your hand during the vote. No need to shout so loudly now. Juo Chenki crossed his arms and sneered. Everyone, if anyone dares to vote for Mu Kyonyu, they're making an enemy of me. You stood behind Mu Kyonyu and glanced at him, your eyes looking at him like he was an idiot. Just then, another director, Liu Lianchuan, sneered, Miss Mu, why don't you explain to us how you used underhanded means to seize these shares from Mu Dongxing? Mu Kyonyu frowned slightly. Although the shares were taken by Suwuji from Mu Dongxing, it was his son who hired assassins first. It wasn't exactly underhanded. Seeing Mu Kyonyu silent, you grinned and said, explaining it once is boring. How about I demonstrate it for you? Instantly, Liu Lianchuan slammed the table and shouted, who do you think you are? You have no right to speak here. You shook your head, snapped your fingers, and called out, "Zipang, show him how it's done." The towering figure suddenly moved, bang, before anyone could react. Zipang's heavy fist smashed into a bodyguard's face. The bodyguard lost his balance, his head slamming into the glass wall of the corridor. Crash, the glass shattered, and the bodyguard was left covered in blood, unconscious on the ground. Instantly, a few directors stood up in panic. You pressed your hand down in the air and grinned. "Sit down. I said no one leaves, or their legs get broken." Liu Lianxuan trembled all over. The bodyguard who had been knocked out by Zipang was one he had brought. This was a clear warning to the others. The directors were stunned. They had never seen a board meeting turn into something like this. You continued to smile. "Now, does anyone else have objections? Feel free to speak up. I'm a very democratic person." Liu Lianxuan clenched his fists and shouted, "Dastard, is this what you call democratic?" Meanwhile, Mu Qianyu remained calm, a faint smile on her face. The cards in her hand hadn't even been played yet, and Suwuji had already intimidated half the room. Just then, Zhuo Chenqi, who had first opposed, slammed the table again and shouted, "This is outrageous. Call the police. Someone's assaulting people here." You glanced at him and grinned. "This little injury is considered assault. Zipang, show him what real assault looks like." Zipang took a step forward, lifted his foot, and kicked hard. A bodyguard standing 5 meters away was sent flying. When he landed heavily, he was already at the other end of the corridor. Then Zipang walked over, grabbed him, and punched him in the chest. The bodyguard was sent flying back, spitting blood and with several broken ribs. You looked at Zhuo Chenqi and grinned. "Actually, that kick and punch were just a small taste of what I can do. Want to try it yourself?" Zhuo Chenqi's lips trembled. The bodyguard who had been beaten to the point of vomiting blood was one of his men. It was clear to the directors that Mu Qianyu had come prepared today, with precise targets in mind. At this moment, Mu Qianyu turned to look at you, her beautiful eyes filled with surprise. You winked at her, clicked your tongue, and made a playful expression. Just then, Liu Lianxuan, thinking you were just Mu Qianyu's lackey, pointed at her and slammed the table, shouting, "No matter what, using violence will never get you Lingnu insurance. I'm Mu Dongsheng's good friend. I will never vote for you." Mu Qianyu turned to him and said, "Director Liu, if you check your email now, you'll find a report detailing a series of you've committed since taking office." Instantly, Liu Lianxuan's expression froze. Then he snarled, "You're trying to frame me." Mu Qianyu continued, "Whether it's framing or not, you know the truth. If this email is made public, the company's reputation will be severely damaged, and client trust will plummet." She looked around at everyone and said, "Lingmu Insurance is the heart and soul of everyone here. I believe no one wants to see it collapse because of someone's personal greed." Liu Lianxuan's expression grew even fiercer. "This is slander." At this point, Mu Qianyu glanced at the board secretary, He Han. He opened a file box on the table and pulled out a stack of documents. These are all the evidence of Liu Lianxuan's. Whether to make it public or not, you can decide after reading it. His words were even more shocking than Suwuji's violence. As the board secretary, no one knew the company's operations better than He Heng. Instantly, Liu Lianxuan glared at He Heng, calling him a traitor. He Heng didn't take offense. As he handed out the documents, he said calmly, "There's no such thing as betrayal here. I've always been working for Mu Yuanming." Mu Yuanming, the second son of the Mu family, was Mu Qianyu's father. A few directors gasped. The room fell silent, so quiet you could hear a pin drop. After everyone had finished reading the documents, Mu Qianyu continued, "Everyone, the data in these documents is completely. I don't know if you feel the same shock I did after reading it." The room remained silent. Even the previously outspoken Zhuo Chenqi was speechless. After a long silence, one director finally spoke up. "This document be made public. Otherwise, Lingmu Insurance is finished." Mu Qianyu nodded, then looked at Liu Lianxuan and said, "Director Liu, it seems you'll have to leave the board. Whether you turn yourself in or jump from here, the choice is yours." At this moment, Mu Qianyu's commanding presence emerged once again. The delicate girl suddenly transformed into a queen, exuding an aura of control. Just then, Zhuo Chenqi slammed the table and shouted, "Liu Lianxuan, you're really dragging us down." He and Liu Lianxuan had previously allied with several directors, planning to deal a heavy blow to Mu Qianyu today. But now, he found himself in a position. Liu Lianxuan, hearing this, turned tail and slumped in his chair, unable to speak. You gestured to Zipang. "Take this old man out. Make him spill everything." Zipang nodded, dragging Liu Lianxuan out of the room. As soon as they left, you heard a loud thud and a cry of pain. You rubbed your temples, not even bothering to look. This scene didn't elicit any laughter. Instead, even the most vocal Zhuo Chenqi sat silently, his face ashen. Several directors, who had promised to ally with him, now looked at him with distrust. Clearly, Mu Qianyu looked around the room and said calmly, "From now on, as long as no one uses against me, I won't retaliate." No one responded. Everyone was deep in thought. Mu Qianyu continued, "In recent years, the profits of the Mu family's second branch, under my management, have increased sevenfold. Meanwhile, Lingmu Insurance has been declining for the past 2 years. What I can guarantee is, if I become the chairman of Lingmu Insurance, I will not let the interests of the shareholders be." After a full minute of silence, one of the previously opposing directors spoke up calmly, "Actually, if Miss Mu can emerge victorious in the Mu family's power struggle, she must be extraordinary." Another director added, "In business, we don't fight over personal matters. I won't go against profit, working with Miss Mu. I believe Lingmu Insurance has a bright future." Finally, The board secretary, Yi Heng, said, "Everyone, let's vote now. Those in favor of Mu Qianyu becoming the new chairman of Lingmu Insurance, please raise your hands." Before Yi Heng could finish, more than 10 directors had already raised their hands. "I agree." Seeing that 6 people hadn't raised their hands, you looked at them and grinned. "What are you waiting for?" Instantly, the 6 hurriedly raised their hands. "I agree," Yi Heng announced. "Congratulations to Miss Mu Qianyu on becoming the new chairman of Lingmu Insurance." At the entrance of Queen's Bar, a brand new Maybach S680 was parked. Xi Yinglei pointed to the door and said, "That's her." A short-haired girl in a white tracksuit walked into the bar, holding a glass of juice and sitting on a high stool. You nodded in approval. She has a healthy, most importantly, she's all natural, every day. Many beautiful women frequented Queen's Bar, but most had undergone cosmetic enhancements. You had seen so many that, even through their clothes, you could tell if they were real or not by the way they moved on the dance floor. Xi Yinglei remarked, "She's, boss, do you need her?" You pointed at the short-haired girl and said, "She keeps frowning. Clearly uncomfortable with the nosy environment, but she's still looking around, which means she's here to find someone. Send 2 people to check her out." Xi Yinglei chuckled. "Shouldn't the boss handle this personally?" Her words carried a double meaning. You glared at her. "If you keep joking like this, I'll check you out first." Xi Yinglei didn't seem to care. Afraid the boss won't dare. Just then, Xi Peng spoke up. "Boss, I have a question." You patted his shoulder. "It's rare for you to ask a question. Go ahead." "I'll answer anything," Xi Peng said seriously. "Boss, if I say something wrong, you deduct my salary. But manager Xi keeps joking with you. And you only threaten to check her out. Why don't you check me out?" Xi Yinglei burst out laughing, her cheongsam swaying enticingly. You gritted your teeth and shouted, "Xi Peng." At that moment, 2 men approached the short-haired beauty, smiling and clinking glasses with her. Saying something, the girl waved them off, clearly uninterested. One of the men took out a car key and slapped it on the table, judging by the key's design. It was a Porsche, but the girl picked up the key and dropped it into her glass. Your eyes lit up. "She's got some guts." Xi Yinglei chuckled. "She's definitely the boss's type." This short-haired girl was Zhang Wangxin, the older sister of Zhang Haobin. You wanted to use your cooperation with Mu Qianyu to remind the capital of the Su family. Meanwhile, in the capital, someone had also come to Linzhou ahead of schedule. Because of your deliberate, high-profile actions, when Zhang Wangxin walked into Queen's Bar, and your gaze fell on her, they officially began to intersect. Both sides wanted to probe each other's. A man spent 100,000 yuan on a second-hand Porsche 718 to pick up girls at bars. Every time he flashed the car key, many girls would follow him to his car. But today, he met a tough nut to crack. The girl actually dropped the key into her glass. Zhang Xinming was furious. He shouted, "Do you know who I am?" Zhang Wangxin replied, indifferently, "I have no interest in knowing." The suspect is currently responsible for 2 deaths and 1 severe injury. The severely injured one. As Zhang Wangxin spoke, she turned to look at the injured person in the distance. She corrected herself, saying that all 3 assassins from the Ducaro organization were dead, but it was uncertain if any had escaped. De Yangxi nodded and said, "Young Master Zhang, we will investigate immediately." However, Zhang Wangxin patted Su Wuji's shoulder and said, "This citizen acted bravely, driving to intercept the suspect. He has made a significant contribution." Su Wuji was somewhat surprised by this praise. It seems Zhang Wangxin is much stronger than her brother. Yes, I was filled with courage at that moment. In such dangerous times, not everyone has the guts to step forward. It truly deserves recognition. Zhang Wangxin glanced at Su Wuji, thinking to herself, how shameless. Zhang Wangxin didn't have a car in Linzhou, so she continued to use the Tiguan. Su Wuji didn't object to this. But this matter wasn't over. After all, whether that sniper belonged to a Chinese department or was a foreign mercenary remained unknown. When Zhang Wangxin returned to her room, she instinctively sniffed the air. She was all too familiar with this smell, the metallic scent unique to firearms and the gunpowder residue left after firing. Zhang Wangxin looked at her right hand, trying to recall what it had touched earlier. Besides grappling with the Ducaro hunters, she had also pulled Su Wuji up from the ground. Zhang Wangxin immediately took out her tablet and began recalling the terrain from today's battle. She hastily sketched a building, marking the sniper's position, the escape route of the last hunter, and the spot where Su Wuji had driven into the suspects. No way, Zhang Wangxin thought, as Su Wuji's pale, panicked face flashed in her mind. Her gaze turned sharp. But when you just returned to the Queen's Bar, you smell blood. Instantly, you became alert. How could there be such a smell in the room? You yanked the door open and found a woman in black athletic wear lying on the floor. Seeing her figure, you couldn't help but say, that butt is as perky as Captain America's. The woman was clearly badly injured, spitting blood on the floor. But you didn't help her up immediately. Instead, you checked the real-time location of the lust killer. Instantly, you cursed it in your mind. You ran away. But why did you come to me? I don't want to be targeted by Ducaro's mad dogs. At that moment, the killer spoke up. Books say that when you're in trouble, don't seek those you've helped, but those who've helped you. So, I came to you. Li Wenyan's eyes widened. Damn, you're Su Jian. Su Jian said with difficulty. Help me take off my clothes. What are you waiting for? Idiot, you retorted. How did you end up like this? If your enemies take it out on me, I won't let you off. This guy's acting is quite convincing. After all, Su Jian doesn't know yet that you were the sniper on the scene. Su Jian said nonchalantly, you can still not let me off now. Do whatever you want with me. Instantly, you said with a dark expression, if you don't want to talk, forget it. Even with such serious injuries, you're still flirting. Then you picked up a pair of scissors and cut open Su Jian's clothes. Her smooth, delicate back skin came into view. There was a knife wound on her arm, but fortunately, it wasn't serious. You turned her over and cut open her athletic pants. This woman's figure was simply too good. Even though her undergarments covered the key areas, the explosive curve still shamelessly assaulted your eyes. Su Jian followed your gaze and looked at her chest, asking, "Does it look good?" You frowned and said, "I always feel like carrying these two things around is just too cumbersome. Aren't they heavy?" As you spoke, you picked Su Jian up and carried her to the bedroom. Laying her on the bed, Su Jian grinned and said, "Am I the first woman to sleep in this bed?" "Impossible. This bed has women sleeping in it every day. I change them out daily," you said, taking out a first aid kit from the cabinet and starting to clean her wounds. When the alcohol touched the knife wound, Su Jian broke out in a cold sweat. Her white undergarments were almost soaked through. Seeing this, you couldn't help but, "You're sweating so much, my sheets are soaked." Su Jian flirtatiously said, "I've always been like this. Watery." Instantly, you said with a dark expression, "You're going to flirt yourself to death." Su Jian pouted and said, "There's another wound on my chest." Before passing out, you steadied your mind. With such a fair sight before your eyes, it was impossible to stay calm. If you took a wet wipe and cleaned along the valley, it would really ... When Zi Yinglei and Zi Tan entered your room, they were startled by the red stains on the sofa. Zi Yinglei hesitated and asked, "Miss Zhang, should I make you some yam, red date, and black rice porridge?" Zhang Wangsun, sitting in a chair, said, "Thank you, I'm not hungry." Zi Yinglei, with a concerned expression, said, "It's not about hunger, but to help replenish your blood. No need." Zhang Wangsun realized and instantly felt extremely awkward, her face turning bright red. "Ha ha ha, you laughed so hard on the bed that your stomach hurt." At that moment, Zi Pan looked at Zhang Wangsun, who could bear sons, and asked very seriously, "Miss Zhang, are you injured?" "Ha ha ha, you laughed until tears streamed down your face." Just then, your phone rang. Seeing the caller, your expression changed, and you immediately answered. The voice on the other end was urgent and excited. "Boss, we have news on Fenji. All these years, he and his accomplices have been hiding in Jingyang City." Instantly, a flash of killing intent appeared in your eyes. "Send me his location," you said. Then shouted to Zi Tong and Zi Yinglei, "Everyone, assemble. We're going to Jingyang to catch him." At that moment, Zhang Wangsun's eyes also showed a trace of seriousness. She was certain her intuition was right, that sniper rifle must be related to Su Wuji. "I will definitely uncover you," she thought. It was almost 3 a.m., and the Queen's bar was still open, but all the security and male staff had hurried out and quickly got into cars. Zi Yinglei spoke into the walkie-talkie, "The Queen is closing. We'll take a day off tomorrow." No business. As soon as he finished speaking, the entire bar lost power. The once bustling nightclub instantly turned pitch black. The customers inside were stunned but didn't think much of it, assuming it was a sudden power outage. Zhang Wangsun, seeing this, became curious. What could make the entire Queen's bar stop doing business? What could cause such a change in Su Wuji? Her heart was filled with curiosity, but she didn't dwell on it. She immediately jumped into the domestic SUV and sat in the back seat, next to Su Wuji. Seeing Zhang Wangsun get in, he didn't drive her away. "It's good you're here, an extra assistant," he said. Zhang Wangsun replied, "I did say I'd follow you for the next 10 days. Su Wuji wasn't joking. His expression was extremely serious, a side of him Zhang Wangsun had never seen before. "What's going on? Can you tell me in advance?" She could tell that the staff and security from the bar who got into the car were all elites. Even professional security companies might not compare. At that moment, Zi Yinglei, sitting in the passenger seat, took over the conversation. "Boss, after 2 years of investigation, we finally have a lead on the Fenji human trafficking case." Instantly, Zhang Wangsun's eyes widened. "Fenji, the trafficker who abducted 60 children. The one with a nationwide manhunt but was never caught." Zi Yinglei nodded. "Yes, the boss never gave up. Today, we'll finally have a result." Hearing this, Zhang Wangsun glanced at Su Wuji but didn't say more. She knew how much manpower and resources such a nationwide investigation would require. She never expected a seemingly unscrupulous nightclub owner to be quietly working on this. Just then, Su Wuji's phone rang. Without hesitation, he answered in front of Zhang Wangsun. "Boss, we've confirmed that Fenji is currently hiding in Xi'an Town, Jingyang City. Her current name is Han Gulan, and she has been running a restaurant for many years. Her former accomplices work there as waiters and chefs. I suspect this restaurant has been a hub for human trafficking all these years. The clues from the child abduction cases 2 years ago led to Jingyang but then went cold. This group is likely still trafficking." Su Wuji said gravely. "Don't alert them. Wait for me to arrive." Zhang Wangsun had a deep impression of that trafficking case. With the internet now, the parents often posted heartbreaking videos seeking help, making one wish to tear the traffickers apart. Zhang Wangsun clenched her fist and said, "Boss Su, in this matter, you're a living bodhisattva." Su Wuji shook his head slightly. "I'm far from it. I'm just doing what I can. It's good that you're willing to help me, young Master Zhang. At least you can explain things to the police afterward." Zhang Wangsun said, "No need." She then picked up the phone and dialed a number. "This is Major Zhang Wangsun. I request the mobilization of the Linjiang Province Special Operations Group for fire support. Location, Xi'an Town, Jingyang City. Both Linzhou and Jingyang, or prefecture-level cities in Linjiang Province, with developed economies. However, The northern part of Jingyang is mountainous, and Xi'an Town is a rural town in the mountains. This town is located at the border of Linjiang and Xizang provinces, connected by a mountain road. Gulan Restaurant is located beside this road. It was already 7 a.m. and the group hadn't slept all night. All the restaurants along the mountain road were open, with trucks parked on the side. Long-distance drivers who had been driving all night often chose to have breakfast in Xi'an Town. Su Wuji, sitting in the car, said, "Our car will go in first, the others will wait on the outskirts." "Have you memorized the suspects' appearances?" Xi Yinglei nodded. "Boss, all the men have been memorizing them for 2 years. We won't mistake anyone." Hearing this, Zhang Wangsun was secretly amazed. To prepare for this day, they had been memorizing for 2 years. Clearly, Su Wuji had all his men fully committed to this task. At that moment, a flash of killing intent appeared in Su Wuji's eyes. "Good. Don't let a single one escape. We'll uproot this place today." Zhang Wangsun took out two communicators from her bag and handed one to Su Wuji. "The Linjiang Special Operations Group will arrive in 10 minutes. Command can be handed over to you." "Thank you," Su Wuji said, then turned to Xi Yinglei. "Yinglei, you and I will go to Gulan Restaurant to check the situation." Zhang Wangsun proactively said, "I'll go with you." Su Wuji nodded and continued to Xi Yinglei. "Then take my gear and find a good spot. If anyone tries to resist and escape, snap them." Xi Yinglei nodded, got out of the car, took a long box from the trunk, and quickly disappeared from view with her long legs. Zhang Wangsun, seeing this, was somewhat incredulous. "Boss Su, you're saying this right in front of me?" Su Wuji looked at the distant Gulan restaurant and said lightly, "Have you forgotten? We're comrades now. You wouldn't arrest a comrade first, would you?" Zhang Wangsun frowned. "But you're having managers shoot to kill. These traffickers deserve to die 100 times over. The current laws are far too lenient for them." Zhang Wangsun said, anxiously. "But no matter what, if you shoot and kill someone privately, you'll have to bear legal responsibility afterward." Su Wuji patted her thigh and said, "That's why I didn't refuse your Special Operations Group support." Instantly, Zhang Wangsun understood. Su Wuji was having the Special Operations Group take the blame for the sniper rifle. "Fine. All the bullets fired from that gun will be credited to the Linjiang Special Operations Group sniper." Su Wuji nodded and smiled. "Thank you. Good thing you're not a rigid woman." As the two got out of the car, a middle-aged man stepped out of a van nearby and said, in a low voice, "Boss, we've sent people to watch the homes of the accomplices." This man was Li Kaosheng, who had spoken to Su Wuji earlier. Zhang Wangsun looked at his right hand, noticing the calluses on his fingers and the base of his thumb. She was all too familiar with such callus patterns. Su Wuji nodded. "Take your men and block the other end of the town." "Wait for my orders." Li Kaosheng nodded and got back into the van. Zhang Wangsun quickly asked, "Is he a veteran?" Su Wuji nodded. "An old scout from the southwest military region. He's fought against the Vietnamese." Instantly, Zhang Wangsun was amazed. Such veteran scouts who had seen combat were treasures in the military. Even ordinary generals might not be able to command their respect. Yet, Li Kaosheng obeyed Su Wuji's orders without question, clearly holding this young boss in high regard. At the entrance of Gulan Restaurant, a 40-year-old man was frying dough sticks. Seeing the couple approach, he greeted them. "You two, here for breakfast. We have everything here. If you're tired, you can rest too." Zhang Wangsun glanced at Su Wuji, her smile carrying a hint of coquettishness. "Honey, I'm hungry. These dough sticks smell so good." Su Wuji, seeing Zhang Wangsun's cooperation, said, "Then let's eat here. Next time I'm driving, don't keep reaching over from the passenger seat. It's exhausting." The man frying dough sticks gave a knowing smile and glanced at Zhang Wangsun a few more times, his eyes scanning her like a predator eyeing its prey. Zhang Wangsun pinched Su Wuji, making it look like a playful couple's banter, but only Su Wuji knew how hard she had pinched him. After sitting down, Zhang Wangsun whispered, "What are you doing joking around at a time like this?" Su Wuji whispered back, "That guy frying dough sticks was looking at you in a very inappropriate way." Zhang Wangsun recalled and said, his smile was indeed lecherous. Su Wuji pointed to the 5-story building behind the restaurant's main hall. "That's the accommodation area of Gulan Restaurant. If you came here alone, something might have happened to you," you said irritably. "She's covering her face with a hat. Which eye of yours sees that she's pretty?" Xi Peng replied very seriously, "My mom taught me. Such a woman can bear sons. Women who can bear sons are all pretty." He glanced at the area below Zhang Wangsun's waist, said, "Auntie is wrong. Having a big butt doesn't necessarily mean you can bear sons. This is a matter of genetic probability." At this moment, Zhang Wangsun felt a certain part of her body getting a bit warm from the gaze, so she sat up. He looked at Xi Peng and asked, "Tall and sturdy, good physique. Is he your bodyguard?" You said irritably, "He's my uncle." Xi Peng's expression turned serious. He thought for a moment, feeling that the boss might be joking. Then he said, "Boss, I'll wait outside for you. There's something I need to report to you." Suddenly, you were a bit surprised. Xi Peng actually grew a brain. He didn't spill the beans in front of Zhang Wangsun. Clearly, she had already pried open the mouth of that Ducaro hunter, so you nodded, prepared to follow Xi Peng out. Just then, Zhang Wangsun also stood up, said, "Where you're going is none of your business. This is my territory. I can go wherever I want. This is my personal privacy." Zhang Wangsun smiled slightly and said, "No matter where you go, I'll be with you. You've offended the Ducaro organization. They will retaliate against you. For your personal safety, I have to protect you closely." At this moment, Xi Peng interjected, "Boss, he likes you." Immediately, you glared, said, "Which eye of yours sees that he likes me?" Xi Peng replied very seriously, "My mom said, when a man chases a woman, it's like climbing a mountain. When a woman chases a man, it's like piercing a veil. As long as a beautiful woman is willing to chase, it's hard not to succeed. You said irritably, and he chased your dad like this back then. Zipang, however, shook his head, said, no, my mom said my dad liked her, mainly because she had a big butt, could bear sons. Immediately, Zhang Wangsun burst out laughing, but when she noticed your gaze, subconsciously falling towards her lower back again, she stopped laughing, tugged at the hem of her coat. Seeing this, you said to Zipang, if you have anything, report it to Manager Z, as long as I'm with this beauty. Don't come to disturb me. Okay, boss. Wish the boss to bear sons. After saying that, Zipang turned and left. At this moment, Zhang Wangsun said meaningfully, Boss Su, I'm not necessarily your enemy. You should do what you need to do. No need to be so wary of me. You lay down on the bed irritably and said, only a ghost would believe that. Anyway, I stand straight and am not afraid of a crooked shadow. Zhang Wangsun also continued to sleep on the sofa with her clothes on. Suddenly, her expression changed slightly. She clutched her stomach, sat up directly. Crap, I was so focused on catching the Ducaro killer. I forgot today is her date. Didn't add protection in advance. Zhang Wangsun glanced at you, picked up her luggage bag, lowered her head, and quickly rushed into the bathroom. You glanced at the spot where she had just been sitting. Couldn't help but shout angrily, you owe me a sofa. Then you called Zi Yinli. You and Zipang come to my room. Throw this sofa away. In fact, while Zhang Wangsun was in the bathroom, the Ducaro organization captive had already been transferred away, and Su Jian, before her injuries healed, absolutely wouldn't. Here, a fight broke out. The main culprit was captured. Other members of the gang probably scattered and fled. Before Su Wuji's voice faded, gunfire sounded outside. A man drove a car trying to forcefully break through. Zi Yinli's sniper rifle fired directly, shattered the driver's side window, took the guy's life, and the security and waitstaff from Queen's Bar all rushed into the scene with batons and daggers. A large-scale arrest operation had completely unfolded. The momentum was like driving tigers to devour wolves. However, Su Wuji's side's arrest operation was somewhat different from the police's process. They acted directly, beat the other side until they couldn't move before arresting. As for accidentally killing, then so be it. Anyway, the boss would handle the aftermath. At this moment, facing more than a dozen strong men rushing out from the backyard, Zhang Wangsun took the lead. Her long, elastic legs directly kicked a man down, then knocked another one down with a punch. Everyone hit by her lost their fighting ability on the spot. However, after she took down 6 or 7 people, the entire restaurant had quieted down. At Su Wuji's feet, more than 10 people were already lying. Zhang Wangsun was a bit surprised, but didn't say much. Instead, she directly said, they have quite a few people. Let's split up. Su Wuji nodded, said, you keep an eye on the main culprit. I'll go catch people. Facing Su Wuji's orders, Zhang Wangsun didn't argue, nor did she interfere, but what slightly surprised her was, the gunfire outside didn't stop, even became quite intense for a few minutes. She couldn't help it, asked over the communicator. Lin Jiang Special Operations Group, report the situation. A Special Operations member reported, Major John, quite a few people are breaking through. More than a dozen even have handguns and rifles. Hearing this, Zhang Wangsun fully understood. This town was a big den providing shelter for the human trafficking industry chain. Who knows how many people are involved, under attack. Those traffickers would definitely fight to the death, so Zhang Wangsun said, over the communicator. Special Operations Group, facing escape and resistance. Show no mercy, shoot to kill, I'll take responsibility for the explanation afterward. 2.5 hours later, the battle in Xi'an town was basically over. The Lin Jiang Special Operations Group had shot and killed armed resistors on the spot, reaching a total of 12 people, and those beaten to the point of losing mobility numbered 60 to 70. From nearby hotels, 80 young girls were rescued, and 7 children who hadn't been sold yet. Truly shocking numbers. Moreover, the Xi'an town trafficking group had grown so big, it's hard to say there was no assistance from foreign forces. Zhang Wangsun kept her word, took on all the explanation work afterward. The Linjiang Provincial Department therefore didn't give Su Wuji a hard time, but the cleanup work at the scene also took 2 days and nights, with all the elite forces deploying. Queen's Bar also closed for 2 full days. When we returned, the bar's staff, though exhausted, were all in high spirits. After all, they had taken down the Xi'an town trafficking den, captured the most heinous culprit. It really was a great deed. When the convoy was nearing Linzhou, Zhang Wangsun received a text from his brother Zhang Haobin. Brother Xuan has smashed Queen's Bar. To vent my anger, Zhang Wangsun looked at this message, suddenly became murderous. The man, originally a third-generation red from the capitals, had a club snatched by a country bumpkin. Immediately, he was furious, directly led a group of people to smash your bar. Just as he was smoking and watching the show, a woman walked over with a gloomy face. Immediately, the man's heart skipped a beat. Quickly threw the cigarette on the ground, said, Wangsun, why are you here? Zhang Wangsun pointed at the bar's entrance, shouted, why did you smash this place? Bai Zhuang frowned, explained, Wangsun, you know, Oriental Beauty was my first investment in Linzhou with a few buddies, but the boss of Queen's Bar used underhanded methods to snatch it away. If I don't stand up, what face do I have to mix outside? Zhang Wangsun said irritably, brother, they used your influence to act tough. Now that something's happened, they want you to stand up. Why are you so naive? Bai Zhuang was scolded without any temper, didn't react for a moment, still wondering why Zhang Wangsun was so against his actions. After all, though they grew up together. Their statuses had never been equal, strictly speaking. He had always been Zhang Wangsun's follower, so Bai Chuang frowned, said, I have to meet that bastard at least once. Let him know. People from Linzhou have to bow before those from the capital. Men all want face, especially since he's always liked Zhang Wangsun, licked openly and secretly for so many years, though she never paid him any attention. Just then, Su Wuji opened the car door and got out. Grinning, he said, I'm here. Bye. Young master, you're really interesting. Even bringing out regional discrimination. Zhang Haobin, standing nearby, immediately shouted, Brother Zhuang, this is the guy who hit me. Hearing this, Bai Zhuang's eyes immediately turned hostile. His entire aura became fiercer, forming a stark contrast to his previous meekness in front of Zhang Wangsun. So it's you. Immediately, the dozen or so men he brought all surrounded them. But Zhang Wangsun pushed Bai Zhuang, shouted, all of you, stop. Both of you. Apologize to him. Immediately, Bai Zhuang was completely dumbfounded. The girl he liked was standing up for another man, but he didn't immediately blame the other party. Instead, he started to doubt himself. Did I smash the wrong place? So, Bai Zhuang turned to look at the sign on the ground. No mistake. It's definitely Queen's Bar. At this moment, Zhang Wangsun's voice turned even colder. Said, Bai Zhuang, if you don't apologize, pay double for Queen's Bar's losses, then go back to the capital. Bai Zhuang didn't answer, but stared at Su Wuji with complex eyes, because back in the Zhang Wangsun had always protected him, never been so harsh to him because of another man. Then Su Wuji pulled Zhang Wangsun, said, a woman standing in front of a man. What kind of thing is that? Hearing this, Zhang Wangsun's voice softened a lot, said, I can't bear to see you suffer such grievances. Actually, her original intention wasn't to let someone like Su Wuji bleed and shed tears. But once the words were out, it seemed too ambiguous. Bai Zhuang, standing nearby, couldn't believe it. Wangsun, why do you care so much about him? And Zhang Haobin was also stunned on the spot. He suspiciously looked at Su Wuji, started to wonder if this guy was his future brother-in-law. Zhang Wangsun reached out to block Su Wuji behind her. Said, that's right, today, I'm protecting him. Bai Zhuang felt a bit suffocated. Said, I want to know the reason. In his eyes, Su Wuji was just a small nightclub boss, used framing methods to get a few brothers from his club jailed. Such a small figure in the capital circle couldn't even get on stage. But the goddess he had adored since childhood was standing on his side. Before Zhang Wangsun could speak, Su Wuji directly sneered, Bai Zhuang, the shares of Oriental Beauty Club. Why did I take them? Do you really have no idea? Bai Zhuang, seeing this, felt a bad premonition, but still angrily shouted, you must have used underhanded methods, framed my people, idiot. The Linzhou City Bureau arrested 3 responsible persons from Oriental Beauty because they drugged several female college students and took photos and videos to control them and continue making money for them. Hearing this, Bai Zhuang frowned, said, that's impossible, they're all my brothers. Hearing this, Zhang Wangsun glared at Bai Zhuang, said, those so-called friends of yours are really disgusting. But Su Wuji sneered, young master Bai, if you don't believe it, go check at the Linzhou City Bureau. Witnesses and evidence are all there. But coming to smash my place without distinguishing right from wrong, that's really too stupid. Bai Zhuang, facing this direct mockery, didn't speak, but his momentum was clearly suppressed. He wasn't brainless, just that kids sometimes value loyalty too much, especially with his goddess standing nearby. Zhang Haobin, standing nearby, got anxious, said, Brother Zhuang, don't believe his nonsense. This guy must be tricking you. As soon as he finished, Zhang Wangsun directly scolded, Zhang Haobin, not distinguishing right from wrong, I'll break your legs. Saying that, she grabbed Zhang Haobin's arm and swung hard. The latter was thrown several meters away, fell to the ground, in too much pain to get up. Bai Zhuang thought for a moment, still made a phone call, asked an acquaintance to inquire about the matter, even put it on speaker, seemingly to prove Su Wuji wrong. The person on the other end was Li Hancheng, once Bai Zhuang's father's bodyguard. After retiring, was assigned to Linzhou as a police officer. Now the director of Hubin Sub-Bureau. After the call connected, Bai Zhuang smiled and said, Brother Li, got a moment, I need a small favor. Zhuang, no need to be so polite with me. Anything I can help with, just say it. Brother Li, it's about Oriental Beauty Club. That was an investment by a few of my friends, but they got arrested, so I wanted to ask, Zhuang, better not get involved. That club has many issues. As for those friends of yours, better cut ties with them early. Bai Zhuang said, unwillingly, Brother Li, they're all my brothers. But Li Hongcheng remained unmoved, said, Zhuang, some people aren't suitable to be brothers, they'll only drag you down. Bai Zhuang gritted his teeth, said, Brother Li, if this call was from my dad, wouldn't you help? But Li Hongcheng said gravely, Zhuang, if it were your dad, he wouldn't even make this call. All right, thanks, Brother Li. Immediately, Bai Zhuang's face turned pale as he hung up. He understood the meaning behind Li's words. At this moment, Zhang Wangsun said irritably, only turn back after hitting the wall. Bai Zhuang, why are you still so naive? Bai Zhuang originally wanted to make a big scene in Linzhou. Let people in the south know young Master Bai was extending his business to Linzhou. But because of Zhang Wangsun, not only did he not succeed, but also ended up with a bloody nose. Zhang Wangsun watched Bai Zhuang's convoy leave, asked, what's your opinion of him? Su Wuji said disdainfully, no ambition. But Zhang Wangsun shook her head and smiled, said, actually, he's not bad. Just like many kids, easily led astray. This time, Bringing business to Linzhou was also to prove himself in the family, just a bit too naive. Just then, her phone rang. Seeing the caller, Zhang Wangson immediately walked aside to answer. Head. The general course of events. I've already sent it to you through the system. The person on the other end said, you've done a great service this time. We've confirmed, the trafficking crime group in Xi'an Town is related to the Ducaro organization. Long-term smuggling of trafficked people abroad. Zhang Wangson glanced at Su Wuji, said, thinking about it, it makes sense. Otherwise, where would they get so many guns? Actually, this operation. Su Wuji placed his index finger on his lips. He quickly shook his head. Zhang Wangson changed her tone and said, this operation went smoothly thanks to the cooperation of the Linjiang Province Special Operations Team. The voice on the phone said, all commendations will be given. Additionally, you mentioned that when you were fighting the Ducaro assassin, there was a sniper assisting you. Did you find out who it was? Zhang Wangson glanced at Su Wuji again and said, there aren't many clues yet. I suspect it might be someone from the Silver Moon organization. The voice on the phone responded, that's my assumption as well. But the Silver Moon organization isn't righteous either. We must handle this according to Chinese law. If arrests need to be made, they will be made. 10 minutes later, Zhang Wangson left with Zhang Haobin. At this moment, Xi Yunli walked over and softly asked, boss, do you want to go check on Su Jian? Su Wuji said irritably, now I suspect that when Su Jian was kidnapped by Miyun to the club, it was actually a trap he set himself. Instead of being the proper Miss Sujiakuo, he chose to be an assassin in Silver Moon. Is there something wrong with him? Xi Yunli said with a smirk. Now Su Jian is even more inseparable from the boss. Clearly, he wasn't just referring to emotional attachment. Half an hour later, at the top floor of an apartment building in the city center, Su Wuji pressed his fingerprint on the lock and opened the door directly. Xi Yinglei didn't follow him in and said, boss, I suddenly remembered something about finance. The business card said Su Jian, Dr. Su, who just started work today. I'm his friend. The nurse looked surprised, then slightly lowered her voice and said, sir, Dr. Su went to the dean's office 5 minutes ago and should still be there. Su Wuji immediately asked, what happened? The nurse looked scared and said, to date, the chairman's son came for a checkup and saw Dr. Su. They immediately started arguing and it has escalated to the dean. Please go and see. Upon hearing this, Su Wuji quickly went upstairs. In the dean's office, a thin man in his 30s was shouting, either let me beat him up good, or he takes off that white coat and gets out of the hospital. Dean Chen Jack, a returned overseas Chinese, said, Dr. Su is a key talent we hired at our hospital. Can you let go of past grievances? It's been so many years. Chen Jack, if you dare to say one more word for Su Jian, I'll tell my dad and have you removed from your position as dean. At this point, Su Jian sneered, young Master Li, when I was studying in the US, you tried to drug me but I caught on early and kicked you. You've held a grudge till now. Li Yaoshuo roared. Su Jian, that kick almost made me less of a man. I had to undergo surgery twice to recover. Su Jian crossed his arms and continued to mock. Oh, and I called the police. Your dad must have spent a lot to bail you out of jail, right? Hearing the details, Chen Jack stood up and said sternly, Li Yaoshuo, if you continue to cause a scene and disrupt the hospital's operations, this matter will be brought to the board. If the impact is severe, your father might also be forcibly stripped of his board membership. Get lost, you old fool. You think you can strip him just like that? Li Yaoshuo slapped Chen Jack, who, being old, couldn't dodge and had his glasses knocked off. Then, Li Yaoshuo violently pulled Su Jian, who, still injured, lost his balance and fell to the ground. I'm going to kill you, Su Jian. Li Yaoshuo raised his hand to slap Su Jian's face, but found his wrist caught by young man. The next second, Li Yaoshuo felt a sharp pain in his ribs as Su Wuji's left fist landed solidly on his side. The sound of ribs cracking was heard, and not just one. Li Yaoshuo couldn't stand straight, clutching his ribs in pain. Su Wuji then helped Su Jian up from the ground, asking, are you okay? Su Jian smiled. I have enough padding. It didn't hurt. Su Wuji, with a dark expression, said, why are you always so cheeky? Suddenly, Su Jian lifted her high-heeled foot and struck Li Yaoshuo's sensitive area, causing him to collapse in agony. Su Wuji smiled faintly. I had already taken action. You didn't need to kick him. That kick was quite damaging. Su Jian gently smiled. It's okay. If something happens, I won't let you bear it alone. She then lifted her foot again, the tip of her high heel precisely kicking Li Yaoshuo's neck, knocking him out cold. Chen Jack, picking up his glasses, said, you two work well together. Dr. Su, the European headquarters has instructed me to take special care of you. You don't look well. If you need rest. Su Jian shook her head. No need, Dean. It won't affect my work. Chen Jack looked at her, paused for a few seconds, then advised, still, take care of your health and safety. Su Wuji felt a bit puzzled, sensing something odd about the advice. Su Jian was also slightly stunned but then smiled. I will. Dean, don't worry. More than 10 minutes later, doctors and nurses were off duty but couldn't leave the lobby because Li Yaoshuo was lying in the center, awake but unable to move. Su Wuji sat on a chair next to him, one foot on his back. Li Yaoshuo roared, when my dad comes, you're dead. Su Wuji chuckled, your dad is Li Zunyang, boss of Jinzan Entertainment. Such a person becoming a hospital shareholder. Li Yaoshuo shouted, you know it, my dad has connections both black and white. You won't leave Ninghai alive. Su Wuji grinned. Is that so? He then grabbed Li Yaoshuo's hair and banged his head on the ground several times, each thud making hearts tremble. While continuing with his left hand, Suwuji took out his phone with his right and made a call. Lee Zunyang, listen to your son's head hitting the ground. If you're not at Suhui Hospital within half an hour, your son's head will explode. About 20 minutes later, a Rolls-Royce drove straight to the outpatient building, followed by 3 business cars. A man in a black shirt got out of the Rolls-Royce, rolling up his sleeves to reveal tattooed arms. Seeing his son covered in blood on the ground, Lee Zunyang's eyebrows twitched violently. He couldn't remember the last time someone dared to challenge him like this. Lee Zunyang stared at the cheeky young man and said sternly, "You beat my son like this. Do you know this is Ninghai?" Suwuji sneered, "I know Ninghai better than you." Lee Zunyang, not understanding, growled, "Let my son go, and I'll break one of your legs. We'll call it even." Suwuji, stepping on Li Yaoshuo, pointed to Su Jian beside him. "Apologize to my friend and withdraw your shares from Suhui Hospital, and I'll let him go." Li Zunyan looked at Su Jian, his eyes showing admiration for her strong charm. He even felt like competing with his son for her. Quickly regaining his composure, Li Zunyang roared, "Withdraw shares? Are you kidding? Get him, take Yashuo, and kill this guy." Immediately, his dozen henchmen, armed with batons, charged at Suwuji. "Fine, let's see who dies first." Suwuji pulled out the chair from under him and swung it hard, smashing it into Li Yaoshuo's chest, who had just passed out and was now awake, spitting blood. The thugs, seeing this, stopped in their tracks, confused. In Ninghai, someone was daring to challenge their ruthlessness. Suwuji grinned, "Dare to come closer, and I'll keep hitting. Let's see how many hits young Master Li can take." One thug, not believing, stepped forward, and Li Yaoshuo was hit again. The wooden chair breaking apart, Suwuji picked up a chair leg and coldly said, "Who else wants to try?" Li Zunyang, extremely annoyed, had always been the one bullying others, never been so disrespected, but with his son in the opponent's hands, he had no choice. At that moment, a Toyota Prado arrived, and a man in a blue suit jumped out. Li Zunyang smiled. "Con Chalet, you're finally here. Yaoshuo is in his hands, leave him half dead. I want to torture him slowly." Con Chalet was his top enforcer, having fought in underground boxing in Linzhou for 8 years, without a loss. Li Zunyang quickly asked, "Con Chalet, what's wrong?" However, his top enforcer didn't respond but looked at Suwuji in disbelief. "Is it you?" Suwuji squinted and smiled. "I don't remember meeting you." Con Chalet frowned. "I fought in underground boxing in Linzhou for 8 years and only lost once." Suwuji looked at Con Chalet's physique and smiled. "Oh, it's you. I remember now, you're not as good as before." Con Chalet was silent for a moment, then said, "Life has gotten better, and I've neglected training. I hardly fight anymore." Li Zunyang, feeling uneasy, growled, "Con Chalet, are you going to fight or not?" Con Chalet looked at Li Zunyang and said, indifferently, "Boss Li, I can't beat him." Li Zunyang was furious. "Have all the years I spent on you been wasted? At a critical moment, you're chickening out." Suwuji shook his head. "After all, you were once a disciple of Shaolin. Why be a dog for such a person?" Con Chailei's body shook violently. "How do you know I was a Shaolin disciple?" Suwuji said, indifferently, "After fighting you that time, I knew you used Shaolin's Diamond Fist and Tiger Subduing Fist." Con Chalet shook his head and sighed. "In the martial world, one has no choice. I'm not being a dog for Li Zunyang, just making a living." Suwuji added, "In Shaolin, only Master Heng Zhao is adept at Diamond Fist and Tiger Subduing Fist. If I'm not mistaken, your master should be him." Hearing this, Con Chailei's eyes welled up with tears. "Master, I haven't seen him in over a decade." Suwuji grabbed Li Yaoshuo from the ground and casually tossed him to Con Chalet. "Master Heng Zhao's health hasn't been good these past 2 years. He might not have much time left. If you have time, go back to Shaolin to see him." Con Chalet threw Li Yaoshuo to the thugs and bowed deeply to Suwuji. "Thank you, I understand. But how do you know about my master's health?" Before Suwuji could answer, Zipan's voice came from behind. "Master Heng Zhao has liver cancer and came to Linzhou for surgery. My boss arranged the hospital." Con Chalet bowed deeply again. Thank you, Zipeng said seriously. "No need to thank, it cost 400,000. Suwuji quickly raised his hand. "No need to mention that." Con Chalet didn't verify the truth, instinctively choosing to believe. He then turned and stared at Li Zunyang and the thugs. "If any of you dared to oppose this gentleman, you're my enemy. Remember that." The thugs, knowing Con Chailei's usual demeanor, dared not speak. Li Zunyang was almost exploding with anger. "Con Chalet, have you forgotten how I raised you? You're truly an ungrateful wretch." Con Chalet slapped Li Zunyang, who, despite his tall and strong build, had poor resistance and was knocked to the ground. Con Chalet said, indifferently, "Boss Li, over the years, you gave me money, and I settled matters for you. I owe you nothing." After saying that, he strode out, driving north toward Sanshan in Central Plains. Su Jian watched Con Chailei's car disappear and said, "He's not a bad person. A prodigal son returning is worth more than gold." Suwuji shook his head. Perhaps he was never a prodigal son to begin with. He then looked at Li Zunyang, his expression turning cold. "I don't need your apology anymore. Within 3 days, withdraw your shares from Ninghai Suhui Hospital, or else ... double quotes." He kicked the broken chair, sending pieces flying that hit several thugs, causing them to cover their faces as blood seeped through their fingers, screaming in pain. "Young man, you just wait." Li Zunyang threw down a harsh sentence and then turned to leave. He wasn't a simple-minded person. When Suwuji mentioned withdrawing shares again, he realized he needed to consult the big boss behind him. After all, While he could throw his weight around as a board member at Sekui Hospital, he didn't have the final say on how to handle these shares. Sujian hugged Suwuji's head and gave him a big kiss. "You're so handsome." Suwuji pushed her away with a look of disgust, wiping the lipstick mark off his face with his sleeve. After the commotion, Suwuji and Sujian went to his place in Ninghai. Once inside, Sujian kicked off her high heels, took off her coat, and lay down on the sofa. Suwuji, accustomed to her style, sat directly on the sofa and said, "Given Silver Moon's style of wiping out entire families, Zhuo Chenqi is dead, and his son Zhuo Sixuan probably won't last long either." Sujian propped her head up with one hand, tilting it to look at Suwuji with a smile. "Are you afraid I'll go after his son? So you came here to keep an eye on me?" Suwuji noncommittally said, "Your current physical condition isn't suitable for such things." Sujian nodded. "Indeed, someone as sexy as me, if caught by the Dukaro hyenas, would surely be ravaged by them." Suwuji's face darkened. "Can't you stop being so flirtatious?" Sujian stood up, bent over to Suwuji's face, and asked with a smile, "You care so much about me. Is it because you're interested in me or in Silver Moon?" Suwuji instinctively glanced down her collar, catching a glimpse of her alluring state. Sujian followed his gaze. "Oh, so it's this that interests you." She then whispered in his ear, "I'm going to take a shower, and when I come out, I'll be clean and fragrant, delicious." Suwuji turned his head away, ignoring her. When the sound of water came from the bathroom, he steadied his mind and checked his phone for new emails. The latest message caught his attention. Dukaro Organization has activated a 5-star assassin. Silver Moon Organization postpones mission. Seeing this, Suwuji frowned. The Dukaro Organization actually had a 5-star assassin in China. Given Silver Moon's style, Zhuo Chenqi's son Zhuo Sixuan was surely doomed. The Dukaro Organization only needed to keep an eye on him to lure Silver Moon into a trap. In the bathroom, Sujian appeared to be lathering up, but her mind was clearly elsewhere. She didn't want to involve Suwuji, as being targeted by Dukaro's hyenas would mean a lifetime of unrest. Just then, her phone received a message. Luo Sixuan has heavily hired from Hanxing Security Company. Dukaro Organization has activated a mission difficulty level increased. Mission can be postponed short-term. Guanzi was Sujian's codename. As she dressed, she pondered whether to show Suwuji the information about the 5-star assassin and the mission postponement. At that moment, her phone rang. "Hello, I'm Officer Pu Yangxi from the Linzhou Cuban District Police Department. Is this Sujian?" Sujian's eyes showed a hint of vigilance. "Hello, this is she." Pu Yangxi nodded. "I'm currently leading a case on human trafficking and have some leads. I'd like to meet with you in person." Sujian was momentarily stunned, took a deep breath as if making a big decision, and said, "Okay." Double quotes. Pu Yangxi continued, "I'm already in Ninghai. Where are you? I can come to you, or you can come to the Ninghai City Bureau." Sujian, visibly agitated, quickly said, "How about meeting at the cafe next to Baopeng Apartments in half an hour?" "All right." Sujian came out wearing only her underwear. Seeing this, Suwuji immediately averted his eyes. "Darling, I need to go out for a bit. Wait here for me." "Okay," Sujian said, as she bent over to put on her jeans, not hiding anything from Suwuji, who dared not look directly at her. "Darling, stop calling me that. What are you going out for?" Sujian said, "Officer Pu wants to meet me at the cafe next door to discuss the trafficking case." Suwuji didn't insist on following, still not looking at her. "Then go. Be careful." After Sujian left, Suwuji looked around the room. It was an ordinary girl's room, nothing indicating that its owner was an assassin. Then Suwuji's phone rang. Seeing the caller ID, he frowned but answered. A somewhat effeminate male voice came through. "Hi, beloved Shadow Sky King." Suwuji impatiently said, "What kind of name is that? Speak quickly if you have something to say." The voice on the other end chuckled. "Let me guess, you're in China." Suwuji frowned. "Wrong, I'm in India, drinking hand-beaten aloe vera by the G."